The Stop Abuse campaign to help in the announcement that we have to somehow find a way to break the cycle. And in this campaign, I will be speaking on domestic violence because that is the abuse that I know about, but others will be speaking on other levels of abuse as well. We have to come together at some point to understand that abuse is happening everywhere and it seems to be increasing, so we all should do our part to make that happen. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm out there.
What brought you here today?
I came here today to represent the Stop Abuse campaign. My passion is to stop the sexual abuse of children. We're going to start small with America, but we're going to make sure that we take over. I'm 53. I'm a survivor of sexual abuse.
I salute you for your service. I got to get back inside.
Yes. And Andrew found me, or I found him, the CEO of the Stop Abuse campaign. I went up to New York and had the pleasure of meeting him. And there was no way I was going to miss this luncheon.
Thank you, Randa.
Yeah, you bet.
Sally said things were looking good.
Good afternoon and welcome everyone to this briefing on the issue of abuse. We appreciate everybody coming. My name is Steve Disnardo with the Stop Abuse campaign. I'm just here to ask you to sit down, take your seats, and get ready to listen. Our first speaker is Linda Bermudez with the CDC, National Center for Injury Prevention.
Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and to provide some of the data that we have on intimate partner violence and some of the work that we're doing in violence across the lifespan. The Injury Center itself is focused on preventing injury and violence so that people can really live to their fullest potential. And our vision is to put injury and violence prevention on the map as the premier public health achievement of this decade. We know that injuries are the leading cause of death for people basically from the ages of 1 through 44, and certainly responsible for many deaths in the other age groups. And we take a public health approach to preventing injury and violence, going from surveillance through research and program evaluation, identifying what works, disseminating the effective interventions, and then translating them and scaling them up so that we can affect a broader population. And then evaluating their implementation, looking for unintended consequences, and continuing the surveillance. In the area of violence prevention, there's several focus areas that we look at. Child maltreatment is certainly a major area for us, as is youth violence, intimate partner violence, sexual violence, suicide, and elder maltreatment. One of the, we have a lot of data and a lot of information on intimate partner violence, youth violence, sexual violence, and child maltreatment. We're lacking a lot of research in the area of elder maltreatment and how it relates basically to the other forms of violence. So we are starting to do more work in that area now, and we hope that there will be other work supported there so that we can gain a better picture of how this relates to the other violence that occurs across the lifespan. Violence against children and youth, we know that each year there's almost 500,000 cases of child abuse and neglect. 1,770 children died in 2009, and we know that the costs associated with it are tremendous. The total lifetime cost for 1 year for children who are abused is $124 billion. This is a publication that we put out this past year. Homicide is the second leading killer of youth between the ages of 10 and 24. And actually the leading killer of young black males, adolescent black males. And 12% of high school students report being in a physical fight every year. 20% report being bullied, and about 10% report being physically hurt by a boyfriend or girlfriend. So intimate partner violence is starting at an early age, and we know that it continues then as people get older, get into other relationships. We're also seeing more and more evidence of the impact of violence on early brain development. It certainly affects then the lifespan. And now there's evidence that DNA is actually changed by exposures to violence and by violence that is occurring towards in children and youth. It does impair cell growth, It interferes with the formation of the healthy neural circuits, and then it damages the stress response system. So a lot of work being done in that area. We also know there's other consequences of childhood exposure to violence, and I think a lot of this comes out of the Adverse Childhood Experiences study. But health risk behaviors are a major issue. Things like sexual promiscuity, perpetration, alcohol and drug abuse, smoking, diseases and injuries, STDs, including HIV, other problems that are chronic illnesses, and then mental health and well-being issues. We also have a lot of evidence now about the various types of violence that occur, and I think we're really focusing on how do we interrupt some of these cycles. For example, the exposure to parental intimate partner violence sets a sort of pattern for children and for teens. And then we get into issues of teen dating violence and then gradual intimate partner violence as they grow into their adult years. We want to stop this cycle. We want to prevent it. We want to stop these exposures. Sexual violence and intimate partner violence certainly are major issues, and based on the National Intimate Partner and Sexual Violence Survey results that we released in December of this past year, there were 12 million victims of rape, physical violence, or stalking by an intimate partner in a year. So annually, that's what we estimate is going on. Most victims first experience this before the age of 25. And for men, it happens very young. It's generally before the age of 10, particularly for sexual violence. 28% of men who report having been exposed to sexual violence report having it happen before the age of 10. It certainly has a lifetime impact and an impact on what happens with their relationships. We know that 1 in 4 women experience some form of severe physical violence by an intimate partner in their lifetime, and 1 in 7 men also experience severe physical violence by an intimate partner. 1 in 5 women reported having been raped in their lifetime, and most of them knew their perpetrators. So these are not, these may be surprising statistics to some people, but again, it's something that we know we can work to prevent. And over $8 billion in costs for intimate partner violence occur every year. There's certainly health consequences associated with all of this. There's a high prevalence in women of asthma, diabetes, and irritable bowel syndrome. And for both women and men, we see more chronic pain, activity limitations, and poor physical and mental health when they've been exposed to some form of violence. We also knew there were more about these relationships between the various types of violence. Research from the National Survey of Children's Exposures to Violence found links to several types of violence and teen dating violence. And specifically, every victim of physical teen dating violence reported at least one other type of victimization. The lifetime rate of teen dating violence was 6.4% for all youth, but the rates reached 17% for youth who had been physically abused by a caregiver, 25% for youth who had been raped, and 50% for youth who had experienced statutory rape or sexual misconduct by a partner more than 5 years older. And victims of teen dating violence were also 3 times more likely to report physical abuse by a caregiver, almost 5 times more likely to report a gang or group assault, and 4 times more likely to report unwanted internet harassment. In this chart that shows some of the relationships between types of violence, basically we know we have youth violence at the center here only because we have the most evidence in that area. The ACE study, the Adverse Childhood Experiences study, the data that we have there relates violence to other forms of violence later on, child maltreatment, certainly to some of the health problems, but we don't have as much evidence from the ACE yet about what's going on longer term. And we are working on that. We've moved that study into our center. It had been in the Chronic Disease Center, and we're in the process of moving it and taking it on and trying to use it in different ways and hopefully at some point expand the population that it covers. Because if you do, right now the population that it covers is Kaiser Permanente, basically health system population. So we're not getting a really good picture across all populations. So we need to get some better data across other populations. Influencing factors for violence, we knew that there are many, but we also know that risks for violence are increased with alcohol and drug use and abuse, people who have mental health problems that are not treated, if there's a history of violence exposure, low income, anger that people don't know how to deal with, anxiety. And protective factors seem to be religious affiliation, social support, and school bonding. We know that there's multiple factors here and that they play a role in increasing or reducing the risk for violence, victimization, and perpetration. And the factors include other risky externalizing behaviors, such as alcohol and drug use, as well as the internalizing behaviors like anxiety and depression. So what do we do to prevent violence? Some of the work that we do, we really try to take the science and translate it into action. So when we have a survey like the National Intimate Partner Sexual Violence Survey, we try to use that data to figure out how we can intervene and where we can intervene and where can we take some steps that will make a difference. For child maltreatment, for example, one of the programs that has been found to be very effective is the Triple P program or the Positive Parenting program. One of the challenges with that program is very labor intensive because it involves, it's a socio-ecological model, it involves getting a lot of services engaged with high-risk groups and parents who are at risk for not adequately parenting a child. So we have a challenge of scaling that model up. Youth violence, academic centers for excellence in youth violence prevention. We fund 4 of them around the country now. We have funded others in the past, and they are doing work looking at what works in the community to prevent youth violence. Bullying is another issue that we're working on. There's a national effort on bullying, and we're doing an evaluation of a project called Second Step. Intimate partner violence, certainly family-based prevention is one area that we're working in. And in sexual violence, the Green Dot evaluation, which is a community-based program that looks at bystanders that would to try and find out, identify early on when something is going to happen or something is happening. We are also looking at public-private partnerships and how can we enhance those and really use them to prevent violence in the community. We have a partnership in Triple P with the Doris Duke Foundation, the Dating Matters project that we have now funded in 4 cities. We partner also with the List Foundation. So there's places that people have an interest in doing something and it can make a difference. The other area is really building capacity and implementing programs. Domestic violence prevention, enhancement, and leadership through Alliances program, the Delta program, exists in 14 states. And actually right now, there are a number of states from the Delta PrEP program, which are states that are getting ready to implement the Delta program, are meeting in Atlanta to discuss some of their successes and some of the things that they can do in their states. We fund states and territories and DC in the Rape Prevention and Education program. This is really focused on both intervention and prevention, and we're working, there will be more work being done on evaluation of some of the best practices there. We have the Striving to Reduce Youth Violence Everywhere program. We've now funded 4 communities. This is a multi-sectoral approach to preventing youth violence, and it takes the whole community to engage and really work to prevent youth violence. Dating Matters, as I mentioned, is in 4 cities right now, and we're testing that out in urban populations. And then we have the Urban Networks Increasing Thriving Youth, the Unity City Network, which is really working on, again, a multi-sectoral approach within some major cities to prevent youth violence. They're all a challenge. It's much easier sometimes to talk to people about how do you prevent unintentional injury because you can talk to somebody about putting a seatbelt on. It's a little bit harder to say how do you get a bunch of partners together and figure out how to prevent violence. So it's more of a challenge, and I think we all have that challenge. So one of the things we do know, though, is that both prevention and partnerships are really key to ending violence and ending violence in the community and in the home. And so we are working in these areas, and if you need more information or would like to know more about what we're doing, please go to our website, and you can also contact Christy Schwartz, who is in our DC office, if you need any information here, and she can help you out. And Christy is here, too, if you want to see. So thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Dr. DeGudas. Can I start by thanking Congressman Costa and Poe and the Victims' Rights Caucus for enabling this meeting to take place. May I thank the members of the Victims' Rights Caucus, their staffs for being here for this important meeting. I'm hoping that in that spirit of partnership we'll be working together, Linda, as we move forward. Abuse is a subject that's been around for a long time. Abuse has been around as long as we have, perhaps. Abuse is also pretty abhorrent. At least it is when it's pointed out to us. Because every day we live in communities that harbour sex slaves amongst us. We all do. Every day on the blocks where we live, men and women are being battered. Do we notice? Do we want to notice? Would we even know what to do if we did notice? Now, almost a quarter of our children are abused, girls and boys, and statistically, it's more likely that it's happening in the house next door, or maybe in the next room, than on the next block or in the next city. That's the statistics of abuse. Abuse happens far closer to home than any synagogue or church. And yet, stranger danger, priests and football coaches continue to occupy the national conversation on abuse. Most abuse is taking place in our homes where we live. Now, when it comes to treating abuse, we as a society have chosen to treat the symptoms. We focus on drugs, we focus on prostitution, we focus on teenage pregnancy. We focus on these things perhaps rather than focusing on the problem itself, the abuse that causes those behaviors. I don't believe we will ever win the expensive and endless war on drugs, on the supply of drugs into this country, unless we start to work harder on stopping the abuse that drives people to take those drugs in the first place. Now, most addicts are survivors of abuse. And they're not in nightclubs partying. They're at home with their needles and their nightmares. That's the story of addiction. Now, our experts, our economists estimate the cost of abuse and violence, I think it comes very close to your figure of $500 billion a year. Just to put that in perspective, I think the Iraq War was about $100 billion a year. So on abuse, we're running 5 Iraq wars all the time, every day, every year. That's an awful lot of money, but more importantly, it's an awful lot of human suffering. Now, abuse is a combination of dangerous attitudes and behaviors. It's passed down from generation to generation. It is the deliberate physical, sexual, emotional, or financial mistreatment of the weak by the strong. Today, its prevalence is scary. Has anybody tweeted here today since we started the meeting? You have? Thank you. Just checking in. I mean, it's all about PR, isn't it? The point I want to make is nearly everyone in this room has at least 100, an average of about 100 friends on their Facebook. Just think about them for a second. Because if you're like me, you've got your close family as friends on Facebook, whether they are or not. You've got the friends that you grew up with at school and other people that you've picked up along the way. Let's think about 100 friends on Facebook for a moment. You know what they do every day. You probably know what their children are doing, even if you don't know what your own children are doing. You know that they're waiting for a pig and 2 cows for Farmville. You're a little bit less likely to know which 20 of your female friends are beaten, abused, or terrorized. Because they are. You're less likely to know about the men who get beaten too. Who are the 20 of your friends who were sexually abused as children? They were. Abuse is truly the cornerstone of society's problems. Pressing and expensive problems. Since we started talking here today, many, many people have had their lives altered by sexual abuse in this country. And that's why we're here, the Stop Abuse Campaign, an umbrella organization working collaboratively with all others to stop all abuse and violence within the next generation. It's gone on long enough, 25 years. That's the target we're setting. Now, we're focused on two time-tested strategies: prevention and intervention. And we also have a real interest in the rights of victims. On prevention, we will weave prevention into the education, into the fabric of our society. Today, we go to healthcare centers, we go to schools, we go to workplaces, we live in our homes. This is where we need to provide the education. Abuse impacts us all, and we all have to be responsible for stopping it. We wear our seatbelts, we constrain our intake of sugar and alcohol. We learn from the associated public health campaigns. But do we do enough to engage communities in stopping the abuse and violence that causes them problems? In intervention, more needs to be done to provide hope to survivors. Survivors often deeply ashamed of their experiences. We need more than the few months we're granted to recover. Recovery can be a lifetime business when you're dealing with abuse. Survivors feel deeply ashamed about their experiences, and in those critical moments when they're deciding to find support, support can be incredibly difficult to find. We need to change that. Working with MPIV, we're going to invest in new ways of treating survivors, and more importantly, new ways of making that treatment available to survivors, especially survivors in underserved populations. We're collaborating with survivor self-help groups around the country, introducing best practice sharing between the groups, minimum standards to achieve, developing ways of branding and marketing the groups so that survivors can find them with greater ease, and providing the legal and administrative support that those groups find hard to provide for themselves because it's expensive. But we have an interest in victims' rights too. And our first right as victims is just not to be abused in the first place. But it goes further than that. Victims should have the right to be treated with the same courtesy and respect as their abusers. And their abusers' rights are enshrined in our laws. Isn't it time for us to divert some of the national energy to stopping abuse, from treating the symptoms? We think it is. And the time is to start that is now. And I'd like you all to participate in it by doing just one thing today. When you leave here, or before if you like, please go to www.stopabusecampaign.org and just take the pledge to be part of this stopping abuse with us. It's all you need to do. www.stopabusecampaign.org and take the pledge. I'd like to hand the podium to Chris Anderson. Chris is here as a male survivor, but he's also here as the Executive Director of Male Survivor. Chris, thanks very much indeed. And I'm Andrew Willis of the Stop Abuse Campaign. I'm told I left that.
Thank you very much, Andrew. And thank you all for being here today. Hello.
Hey.
Hi. My name is Chris. I'm from New York City. My hope today is to share with you my story of healing so that I can show you how vitally important it is we show support to all survivors of abuse. In 2007, I was suicidal, again. Depression and anxiety were ruining my life, and I carried a pain inside from being sexually abused as a child that I did not think I could speak aloud. It destroyed my marriage and threatened to wreck the few friendships I had left. I didn't know what help was out there for someone like me. In large part because I never knew how deeply harmed I had been by the abuse. I had no idea that what happened to me has happened to so many others. But then I learned about something called the Male Survivor Weekend of Recovery. So I got on a plane and went to California and walked into a room with 30 other men that I did not know, but with whom I knew I shared a common injury. And something miraculous happened. Before a single word was spoken, before a single introduction was made, I walked into that room, and for the first time in my life, I did not feel alone. That moment changed everything for me. Now, I'm not here to testify and tell you about all the bad things that happened. You've heard data already about how prevalent the abuse of boys and girls is in this society, and how widespread the ripple effect of those damages are to every single person in our country. Without hope and support, it's very hard to heal. As the executive director of Male Survivor, I speak for millions of men who've gone through what I've gone through. What I want to tell you, and what the survivors I speak for need you to hear, is that what's happened to me can happen to anyone. Not only the abuse, but the healing. Every abuse survivor has the potential to heal. Every shattered soul can be put back together, but it requires support. Today, I'm married to a remarkable woman whose love continues to comfort and challenge me in ways I could never have accepted before. What happened? I and my partners with NPEIB and Stop Abuse will help you understand how you can help your constituents to direct in immediate ways that you can help a survivor. You can make a difference for every survivor by listening to what we have to say. It does not have to be so hard for those who are being harmed today as it was for me when I was 8. You can change that. Thank you. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Mildred Muhammad, the former wife of the convicted and now executed DC sniper, and the founder of After the Trauma.
Good afternoon. In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, I always saw in the name of God, because had it not been for God, I would not be alive today. I want to say that the abuse that I suffered was not physical. And we have to be very careful not to exclude many people who may feel that they are not victims. 80% of us who are victims do not have physical scars to prove it. There are victims, there are survivors, and there are abusers in this room right now. So we have to try to stop talking outside of ourselves and start to talk inside of ourselves too. We also have to understand that there are some places where the stats for those who make an income of over $250,000 are not calculated in abuse. And we have to make sure that they understand that they have some place to go to. Because those who have money feel like there's no one out there for them as well. Just because I have the means to leave doesn't mean that I can leave. And those of us who don't have the means to leave may not feel comfortable speaking to those who can help because of the mistreatment we have received based upon our not having the income in order to get out. There are some legal places that you go to base your ability to pay off of your income. If you have a certain amount of money, they they don't help you. This is also an area that has to be changed too. Most often we find that when we are victims of domestic violence, which is what I speak to, survivors of domestic violence, the children are used as pawns. We don't all know that 58,000 children a year are taken from mothers and given over to abusive fathers. We don't know that the elderly are abused as well. We don't understand that when children reach out and tell you that they are abused, you go back to the person who's abusing them and ask them, are you abusing this child? We don't understand that PTSD, which is in the military, is happening far more than what we are willing to admit, because abuse is everywhere. Victims of crime, of every crime, are crying out in the wilderness for justice. And we have to make sure that we give them the justice that they are looking for. After the trauma has partnered with the National Partnership on Interpersonal Violence, and we stand with them to understand just how deep the rabbit hole goes when it comes to violence. Because we don't always want to look at the person next door. We don't always want to look at it may be us. We want to look outside of ourselves. We want to point the finger at somebody else instead of looking at, when you point that one finger, you got three pointing back at yourself. So you have to look at how you are handling abuse for yourself. Most people look at the statistic that every 9 to 15 seconds a woman is abused. Well, I'm going to shift your thinking to go back to the number one. Because the number one assault of domestic violence and any violence is a verbal assault. It's how I talk to you. It's how I communicate with you. It's how I relate, how I feel to you, and how I want you to interpret that is how I gain control over you. So we have to be careful of the words that we use and how we use them, not just to the people outside of our homes. We have to look at how we treat our own families. We have to listen to how we treat our own children, because it is our treatment of our own children that sends them into pregnancy when they're young, which sends them into talking to someone who gives them a comment, a compliment, when they should be hearing at home, you're beautiful, you're a handsome young man. They should not hear that outside of the house. So I thank you for listening to me. Now I'm going to bring up Bob Geffner.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here at this briefing with all of you and the people on this panel, to be partnering with their organizations, with the CDC and other federal agencies, and to really begin the journey, as you heard today, of stopping abuse. We are here as the National Partnership to End Interpersonal Violence Across the Lifespan to help provide a unified effort, not to reinvent the wheel, but to build upon the organizations, community-based, victims' rights, and others who have been doing this work for quite some time. As you've heard, it's time to move the country in a different direction. We are trying to coordinate a plan to do that. As you've heard today and elsewhere, interpersonal violence is all interconnected. We have to stop focusing on the symptoms and the individual issues and look at the picture. That's the key. It is affecting healthcare, public health, socially. This is a problem in all domains that has criminal justice implications. We must focus on prevention and education so everyone, as our panelists have talked about from their own experiences and you in the audience, can feel safe in their own homes, feel safe in their schools, feel safe on their streets, feel safe in their communities. We don't have that. We need to begin that process by working together with a unified message. If we don't, the statistics you saw will continue to grow. The National Partnership to End Interpersonal Violence Across the Lifespan are organizations, agencies, state, federal, private, universities, individuals coming together. If you happen to look at the poster outside, you'll see the organizations who were members and partners and helping 4 months ago. If you look over here, you'll see all the ones involved now. We are growing by month in every state in this country with the unified message of it's time to stop abuse and interpersonal violence. You've heard some of the statistics. Let's remind ourselves of some of them. Nearly 1 in every 5 women are sexually assaulted in their lifetime. 1 in every 5. If you take 28 children in a typical classroom, 4 of them will be physically or sexually abused before they graduate high school. Elder abuse, youth violence, all these are interconnected. That is the key. That is our message. In a community with 80 homes, you've heard 1/4 of them have violence going on. Children are being exposed. The effects our lifespan approach. People say, well, you can't change that. That's the way it's always been. How are you going to stop abuse in 25 years? I want to remind you of a few things. That same time span, if you go back 20 years, we weren't talking about breast cancer. Too private. Can't talk about that. We have a whole breast cancer movement sweeping this country. Recycle. Well, that's a behavior. People won't do that. They have to actually change behaviors. You can't get people to change behaviors. 20 years later, it's part of our routine. It's an accepted norm. Oh, well, alcohol, that's a compulsive behavior. People are going to continue to die because people go out and drive and drink. Can't change that. 25 years later, the accepted norm is you don't let friends drink and drive. We can change attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors. So it's time to hit one that covers all those. Stopping abuse and violence. Not focusing just on the symptoms, but focusing on the root causes to change attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors. You heard the strategies that we're working on to develop a plan with your hope and your help. Prevention and education. Intervention. Effective intervention to help people recover and heal from trauma. In my language as a psychologist, trauma-informed care in all our systems. And reporting of abuse, proactively, bystander intervention. Not only to have all abuse reported, but effective systems to handle the reports and people well trained. That's the key. That's how we really move to prevention and victims' rights. To change our healthcare system, our social system, our medical system. That's our message. There are people in this room from the National Partnership, if you would stand. They represent researchers, practitioners, frontline workers, advocates, survivors from all disciplines, public health, social service, medicine, psychology, people in every walk of life, from all over the country. You too can become a part. There are flyers on your table and out there. You can become a part of this effort in helping us develop a plan to change the way we respond to violence and abuse and to stop it in the next 25 years. So we quit spending all this money in a time where money is so important. You've heard the individual statistics from CDC of what each thing costs us. When you add it up, can you even conceive of $500 billion in medical costs, health care, public health, criminal justice, social service, mental health? What we could do with a fraction of that money for prevention, education, intervention. So we're here to help, and we hope you will join us in this effort. Thank you. We're now open for questions for any of us or people in the room. If anyone has a question or a brief comment, we did allow time to do that. Yes, Brandon.
Hi.
And I'll repeat it so people can hear.
I'm Miranda Fox, and I'm 53 years old. I was sexually molested as a child, along with my two sisters, by my father. I recently, about a year ago, a good friend of mine's daughter was sexually molested by her uncle. They went through the court system, they did everything right, and the gentleman, the person that molested her, got 90 days in the county jail and 10 years deferred adjudication. Within less than a year, he's already broken 12 probation violations. At that point, when I visited with my friends, that's when I realized what my purpose was on this earth. And I started a seedling organization, and when I say seedling, I mean myself. NotOnOurWatch.net. But as I reached out, I thought I was the only one. And I met an amazing man who is up there, Mr. Andy Willis, and he helped me understand that not only am I a child advocate, but I'm a human rights advocate. You can't be one without the other. And it's up to our generation, us. We're the ones that have to stop it. We've got the technology, the knowledge, the statistical information of at least 40 years. And I'm here to tell you it does happen. And I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to be alive. But I'm still going through a healing process. So I just appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comment. I won't attempt to repeat all of that, but talk about her experiences as a survivor, which automatically made her now an advocate. And that's an excellent. This is not a men's rights, women's rights, child's rights issue. This is a human rights issue. And all of us need to be involved. Any other comment or question? Yes, here, and then we'll go up there.
Okay. Just recently, the Department of Justice came out with a really important study by Dan Saunders that found that the custody court professionals do not have the training in domestic violence that they need, which results in constantly sending children to live with dangerous abusers. I know you know that because you're in the system, and they found that a lot of psychologists and other colleagues of yours don't know what they're doing and are so hurting children. And I just want to urge us to make reforming the custody court system a big part of this, because that has to be part of the work we're doing.
Here, here, here. Yes.
For those of you who didn't hear, he was talking about the family court and repeating the issue of those who've been abused losing custody of their children to the abusers, and people in various mental health and other fields who are doing evaluations who are not well trained and are actually re-victimizing those who have been victimized. And yes, that definitely needs to be a priority. The studies and research coming out, I can tell you we are going to be disseminating, we are going to be promoting that. That is a priority for the partnership, and we are also dealing with it. These are areas that are re-victimization, and these are putting our kids in danger. As you heard the statistics, kids are exposed to domestic violence. It just recycles through the system. We need to stop it at its origin.
Hi, I'm Billy Rice with UCLA School of Public Health and also with the National Partnership. But I'm one of the co-chairs of the Public Policy Committee for the National Partnership. And Irene King and Joyce Thomas are both here from that committee. And we have talked about taking that on as an issue, and the court, educating the courts is an issue that our policy group is really going to go after, and we're going to be talking about it at our meeting in September. So maybe you'd like to join us and help us with that effort.
And Victor Veith, who's on from the National Child Protection Training Center, who's also on the board of the Stop Abuse Campaign. He's on the executive committee of the National Partnership to End Personal Violence. And Victor's very focused on this whole area of training. I was shocked to discover that doctors get about 2 hours training in abuse. That just so beggars belief, really. You know?
And training is the key, as you mentioned too, and Andrew repeated, not only of those in the mental health field, but definitely those in the judicial system, in the criminal justice system, all across. Again, want to emphasize, this is across the board, because it's not one system falling apart. You can talk about Child Protective Services, who doesn't adequately investigate cases like that, or law enforcement, who doesn't investigate, or people in the various professions. So we definitely need to deal with it, and thank you for the comments. All the way back there.
Thank you to all of you who are here to listen, because I am the face of a protected parent. These women here are protected parents. I'm a mandated reporter because I was an educator. I was supposed to report, I was supposed to save other people's children, which I did. But when it came time and my daughter reported sexual abuse, the courts didn't listen. Every single professional along the way did not know their job, did not know how to do it. They leaned on myths, they made things up, and my daughter has been living with a sexual abuser for the last 5 years. Oh. And I don't see her. And this is the courts, it's school officials. I'm a teacher. They do not know, many teachers do not know what abuse is. If they don't see a bruise, they don't understand what it is. And many of us who are in professions have been ostracized from our professions because we're inconvenient. And we're suffering. We can't help our children. Most of us have been driven to levels of destitution. There are mothers living in cars. There are mothers on the streets. These were professional women, nurses, psychologists, teachers, doctors,
flight engineers.
in any walk of life, nurses. They did what they were supposed to do. They followed the law. And they were punished for it, and their children are being punished for it. So we are the faces of the protected parents of the 58,000 children per year who are put into the hands of abusers by the judicial family courts.
I'd like to just add that there are also many women who have gone underground with their children so that no one can find them. And they reach out every now and then to let us know, hey, don't forget about us. We had to change our names, we had to change our children's names, we had to go in places we didn't want to go. There's an underground railroad for victims of domestic violence who are trying to protect their children, and that's real, and that has to be addressed as well.
just to reiterate a couple of things and translate into some other terms, because this is a key issue. And one of the things you pointed out, even though you didn't use that term, but it's a term that we are definitely dealing with. It's called junk science.
Parental
And
alienation.
one of the things that we're working on in our various action teams, as you've heard from training, from research, from practice, is to get the word out about junk science and to make sure that people in the different systems that you just talked about are not being able to use that as excuses to minimize and ignore the different types of violence and abuse that are occurring.
Hi, I'm the founder and CEO of Stop the Silence, Stop the Violent Sexual Abuse. I know I and Stop the Silence, Eileen King, Justice for Children, and half a dozen other people in this room are getting daily, weekly emails and calls from these women. Today was my latest one. She is on the Eastern Shore trying to figure out what to do. And I'm just wondering if NPEIV, which I am part of, by the way, the Stop Abuse campaign, whether we can say to this room about giving any kind of advice today, here and now, to these women and the women of the future that we're getting contacted by.
I think as far as the women of the future are concerned, there is a comment that I can make, and that is that being abused is bad enough. Being re-abused by the system is just not on. So we have to change. And once you say, well, we have to change that, then a big part of changing it is education. Because if the mandated reporters were trained across the country, that would make a difference. If judges were trained across the country, that would make a difference. If our prosecutors were trained, that would make a difference. And the good news is, Victor V from the National Child Protection Training Centre with NPEIV are working on these training packages right now. And so we're trying to put training into universities so that doctors and other mandated reporters get the training they require.
There's a lot of questions. Let me just comment too and summarize. We talked about training. Go back to the 3 strategies. Part of what you're all talking about is what led to that. Because if we go back and attack one symptom, one situation, we're not solving the problem. Because as many of you pointed out, it's systemic. And so that's why we're looking at it from the same standpoint. Which means not only the education that Andrew talked about, the training, but the reporting. You said that. But what happened in the example you gave is that the reports went in, but the people weren't effectively handling the reports. They weren't trained or paying attention. They were focusing, as we said, on junk science. That's where our strategies come in, to develop a national plan for prevention, education, intervention, training, and effective ways of the systems to handle those problems. That's why it has to be all those, or we'll keep having people fall between the cracks. You wanted to make a comment, and then we'll come back.
My name is Maria Mullen, and I have a question as well as I just wanted to briefly say I had my back broken by my ex-husband. We then went through the court systems, and he told them that I couldn't take care of the children financially, physically. He ended up gaining custody while the children had been living in abuse. My son went to live with him and committed suicide 5 months after he went to live with him. These children are in danger. Now, even after all of this, the courts are still have my other 3 children there. Where the problem is CPS came in and tried to help because my youngest got abused beat with a compound bow. So CPS actually did reach out and try to help, and the judge filed an ex parte order placing the children back in the home with the abusive dad. The training, I think, is a good thought. There's so much more. I've been put in jail for smoking a cigarette. I mean, it's just, my story is very long. The problem, training the judges is okay, but after I went to jail for smoking, it got put out there. You know, there was blogs written about it and whatnot. Well, somebody did some research into it and found out that this judge was fully funded by Father's Rights. They also found out that there was a father who had somehow been responsible for his son being stabbed, and the judge gave that man 90 days in jail because he didn't want to destroy the relationship with his children. Now, the relationship with the father is so important, yet he wanted to put me in jail for 21 days and wanted me to do weekends, which is the only time I seen my son. That would have been over 4.5 months that I didn't get to see my child. I think the training is a great idea for judges who are not corrupt, but when you've got money behind it, when there's incentives behind it, his campaign was fully funded by the Father's Initiative programs. I understand that the Father's Initiative, when that came about, was necessary for dads. Now it's being utilized by the abusers. They're the ones using these funds. They're the ones using this stuff that your average father is not going to want to take the children out of the mother's lives. And you see all these women here, their children have been slowly taken out of their lives. 2 of my children have been kept from me for 2 years with no allegations of wrongdoing, neglect, abuse, nothing. My ex simply told the judge that they didn't like me. When they're around their dad, they don't like me. When they're with me and their dad's not around, they're like the same children that I raised all their lives. Somebody's got to get a hold of this. Somebody's got to get the truth out there. And we're fighting, and it's a big war, but we need help of people who are in a position to be able to actually get some accountability for these judges.
Yeah, here, here. That's right.
Thank you for the comment, Joyce. Do you want to?
Well, my heart goes out to all of you. My name is Joyce Thomas, and I am president and co-founder of the Center for Child Protection, which is a nonprofit here in D.C. And we get the same calls that you all are speaking of. And for those of us doing this work, many times we also are helpless against the power of the system. So it is for those reasons that I have become very active with the partnership. And after 25 years of starting a nonprofit and continuing to run it today, I think another 25 years to stop it is nothing. I would like to just say that the realization is that we do have a lot of work to be done. We're looking at a lot of different ideas and strategies, but I think when we really kind of boil it all down, we have to deal with the individual. And we've talked a lot about trauma-informed, which means that everybody's story is the most important story. And it's through their eyes and ears that we realize how severe this problem is. I want us to just not forget the communities that may not get the resources because they may or may not fit into the criteria of agencies of CDC. It's not to say that they're not important, but there's a lot of faith-based groups, community-based groups, small mom and pop organizations that are helping individuals. And if we could take this message of stopping abuse to those communities, it's the neighbor next door that's going to make a big difference. And it's the person down the street, the aunt or the uncle. Somebody's going to have to be that one to do the saving. And so I know I've been at this a long time, and I've gone through a lot of grants, a lot of programs, a lot of staff, a lot of stories. I started the program at Children's Hospital here in D.C., which was almost 35 years ago. The first child sexual abuse hospital-based program in the country. Simultaneously participating in starting the organization, the American Professional Society. So there's a lot of energy that has gone into this work, but we're just beginning. And so I'm here to say that the communities, the grassroots, people doing the work every single day that may not even get up here need to be heard, and I want to be part of that, to take my message to them.
Before I go to the comment with that, I think you made a good point, all of you are, which is sometimes the single voice isn't heard. Sometimes a few voices aren't heard. Our job is to make sure there's hundreds of thousands and millions of voices, and they can't be ignored anymore. That's how we do it.
If you go to www.stopabusecampaign.org,